I'm Anthony Wright, and I am your co-host today on the Living Conversation with,
Adam Dietz, welcome.
and we are here with our guest, Drea, the Sober Herbalist. And Drea, before the break, you were talking about your experience with Lyme disease and the treatment that Western medicine just didn't make it, and you were drawn to Ayurvedic uh, remedies, but then to herbal remedies. But the problem with the herbal remedies was that the medium for carrying those herbal tinctures was alcohol, and that didn't work for you. And it was so striking to me to hear your experience in the herb garden because you had said the hops vine reached out to you and stopped you from leaving. And how did you experience what the herbs, what the garden communicated to you? What was your experience?
Well, it was a crossroads moment. I think people are pretty familiar with what a crossroads is, personal crossroads, where you just feel like, you know, you're put in a position and you have to make a choice. And a choice is kind of heartbreaking and difficult, and there's a forced letting go. And there's there's just a yeah, often it's this weird experience of having to weigh what's going on and make a difficult choice. And anyway, and it usually involves your body and it involves some sort of like very, there's a very mortal physical aspect to that crossroads. But anyways, what I experienced was that I was heartbroken that I went to study, herbalism, that and like I said, I thought it was going to be this like very nurturing, safe environment with all these elders and all this like really a lot of care and consideration and respect and I don't know, security, I guess. And then experiencing that actually there was a lot of like the environment was just not what I expected. And so
From the humans.
I just was brokenhearted. And so I was like, well, I think I'm going to have to quit. But I went into the garden first to kind of like connect with the plants because I had in herb school, I wasn't just a student, I was also a garden apprentice. And that's someone who does
Ah,
work in the garden directly in addition to studying with the herbs. Like we're in charge of the garden for that period of time, that 10 months.
mm-hmm.
So I had already been in there like weeding and weeping and connecting with that garden and its spirits and its beings. And so I went in there with a broken heart, the way you would maybe go into a community where you feel like you're safe and you can trust being vulnerable. And I went in there kind of brokenhearted and sad and just like, I'm going to say goodbye now and thank you. And I hope to reconnect with you somehow. And then it just was like, there was an about face in terms of what happened. That was the response from these beings, was just sort of like, wait.
The
And it
hops
wasn't the
reached out
first
to you.
time that I had like an awakening.
Oh, really?
No, it's just like what you were describing with your experience as a young child being surrounded by this amount immense care and the sensory experience of it.
But the
It
forest
wasn't the
love me.
first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a very overwhelming moment, and it's a spiritual moment in which you really you're so open and you're vulnerable and you're just like you're kind of like down on your knees in a way spiritually.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it from what it seems that the that connection with these plant beings, I mean, in Western idea, we think, oh, they're just plants, right? But they're beings. They have an energy. They have a modality. They have a relationship, you know. And uh, I think maybe normal human beings make an error there because we can walk around and the plants don't. But you know, I'm also what's coming to mind is the role that fungi play in developing a community in terms, and what's his name? Merlin Sheldrake has written
Oh
a
yeah.
wonderful book on the the role that fungi play in forest communities. But I'm also thinking about this, what I think has been called the largest living organism on the planet, which is an aspen grove, which has
Mm-hmm.
thousands of individual trees, but they're all connected in the root system and they're one being, you know.
Yep.
So, but it seems like that was what your experience was in the herb garden. You had made friends, and they let you know
Yeah.
that they didn't want you to leave.
Yeah, I have a question about that. From everything you described, it actually reminds me a little bit when you take crossroads moment and this sense, it just seems like you had such a sense of humility and humbleness to even be in that headspace in the first place. It reminds me a lot of we talk about the Book of Changes, where you could use sincere energy or humble energy. Could you talk about where your headspace was when you were kind of, I feel like you were very open and you were using humble energy. Is that true?
I mean, yeah, because it's part of being like, Anthony's question, the first, like, how'd you become a sober herbalist? And I was like, well, the sober part came first.
Mhm.
And in the recovery, program that I'm in, humility is it's basically an important attitude or posture to always try and practice and maintain, but nothing like a moment of powerlessness or a painful truth or a recognition that you've been beat or something can't be won or it's not going to work to strike you in that position and to just put you there. And so I was definitely in a humble moment because I realized the truth is that the disease of alcoholism for me is more powerful than my desire to stay in some program where the main conversation and the dominant paradigm of preparations was tincturing, plants. And that was the focus. And so, yeah, the humility was the fact that I was like, I can't do this and this isn't going to work with me. And it's like, this is too big of a risk. I'm not willing to take it. And that's the truth of it. Like, I've
How
got to recognize it.
paradoxical it was that for you as a sober person, uh, had dealt with one aspect, and what you just said about this term dis-ease, unease, disharmony, but that was used as a medium for uh, uh, carrying the healing tincture of these loving plant people, plant beings. Um, so how did you solve that?
Yeah, that's I was gonna ask something similar along those lines. Like that was the humble part, right? So
Yeah.
how did you practice sincerity now of going forward and acting? Like you must have had a lot of obstacles and twists and turns along the way where you had to present and you had to be outgoing and you had to produce something. Like so that the sincerity. So we talked about the humble side. Can you talk about the sincerity of you putting your work out there?
Yeah, I mean the sincerity came from the fact that I realized that it's easy in that kind of situation to point a finger and to blame, which I'm absolutely, capable of doing that and saying like you didn't respect me and you didn't prepare for me and you don't understand sobriety, it's like, and I did that for sure, but the moment of sincerity was simply that I was like, "Oh my God, they do not understand alcoholism and addiction. They do not
Yeah.
understand substance abuse. They do not understand why I'm allergic to this alcohol. And even in this form, I can't and shouldn't take it. They just don't know."
Mm.
Yep.
And so the sincerity came from this recognition that it was like I was holding something that needed to be shared because it
Yeah.
was no one's fault. that they
Huh.
didn't. It was simply that no one had shared with them in a way that they could maybe wrap their heads around in that context. And it was like, well, there's no one talking about this.
But
My
what a wonderful opportunity, though, for
I
you.
know. And my teachers who were famous herbalists, very important in the field, very important in the profession, they told me, don't ever, and they said it without even really totally knowing that I was sober. I think they were just speaking to the class. They didn't know us all as individuals. And they were like, don't ever give a tincture to an alcoholic because you could cause a relapse.
Man.
They did say that, but they said nothing more. And I was like trying to raise my hand and say, like, what do you do then? And they just kind of, when I asked that question to them, do you know what they said? Nothing. They did not have they didn't have an answer. And that's when I knew, like, I knew I was the sober herbalist. And like, when I became that person or that brand,
Right.
I knew I had a question, right? And it's like all good research projects begin with a question. And it was like, well, there you go, Drea. Now find the answers, and I'm still doing that. And luckily, I have a very good education. I have a few degrees under my belt, including a master's degree in rhetoric and composition and an interdisciplinary degree in the liberal arts, from Hutchins School. And
Oh, that's right. You're a Sonoma State alumni.
yeah,
How cool.
so I had a whole bevy of I'm a punk rocker, an artist. I had all these different aspects of my being in which to just sort of like begin to pour into this question and this like experience of inquiry.
Great.
Do we have time for another question, Anthony?
Well, we have to take a short break, and we'll be right back. I'm Anthony Wright, and you can get a hold of me through my website, theonaut, theonaut.com, and Adam.
Yes, you can contact me by my email, dietzadam@gmail.com, Dietz, Adam, one word, or the way between at substack.com has all my links and socials and work over there.
Great. And Drea, how can people contact you?
Soberherbalist.com. That's it. All my stuff's on there.
All right. Well, we're going to take a short break and be right back, so stay tuned.